My stepson once told me I wasn't his real dad and had no right to tell him what to do. He said I meant nothing to him. So, when it came time to pay for college, I told him to ask his real dad to cover the tuition. I never thought I'd share this story, but I need to get it off my chest. My name is Robert. I'm 45 years old, and I own a successful wine bar in town, a business I built from the ground up. I'm really proud of it. That wine bar also led me to meet someone important about 5 years ago. Her name was Melissa. She came on board as a bookkeeper to help manage my finances. She was smart, efficient, and had a quiet charm that drew me in. At first, we kept things professional. She was new, and I didn't want to cross any lines. But over time, I found myself looking for reasons to spend more time around her. Eventually, I asked her out to dinner. "Are you asking as my boss or as a man?" she asked. "As a man," I replied. That dinner turned into another, and then more. Soon, we were talking about building a future together. Everything felt right. Melissa was caring, and her son Ethan was polite and respectful. I felt like I had finally found the family I'd always hoped for. About a year into dating, we got married. Melissa and Ethan moved into my home, and I threw myself into the role of stepdad. I took Ethan to sports games, helped him with school, made sure he had everything he needed. I paid for family vacations, got him the latest sneakers, and did my best to give him a better life than I had growing up. He still saw his biological dad from time to time, which I'll admit made me uneasy. I knew some rough details from the past, like how his father, Kevin, had nearly burned down their old apartment several times while drunk. That's why he lost custody in the first place. Melissa said he had gotten sober and that it was important for Ethan to keep a connection with him. "He's still his father," she'd say whenever I brought it up. "Ethan needs to know his dad still cares." I only saw Kevin once, at a school event, and to me, he didn't seem sober. He swayed slightly, had unfocused eyes, but I didn't say anything. After all, I was just the stepfather. Looking back now, I wish I had known more. Maybe I was too focused on being the perfect stepdad to see what was really going on, but that's hindsight. The real trouble hadn't even started. Time flew by, and soon Ethan turned 18. His birthday and graduation were coming up, and he was clearly stressed about everything. What if it doesn't go well? What if nobody shows up? He'd say, pacing around. One evening, I put a hand on his shoulder and said, "Hey, it's all going to be fine. Actually, I've got a great idea. Let's throw your party at the bar. We'll reserve the best section just for you." His face lit up. The bar had become a local hotspot, and he was excited to show it off. "Really?" he said, grabbing his phone. "My Instagram is going to blow up. Everyone's going to be so jealous." I dove into planning. I wanted it to be perfect. I even took him shopping for a designer black suit. He looked sharp like a young professional. "How many guests are you thinking of inviting?" I asked as we finished up at the store. One evening, as we were going over the party plans, I asked Ethan, "So how many guests are you inviting?" He fiddled with his phone and paused for a second. "About 30, he said. "Great. Can you send me a guest list so I can make sure we have enough space and food for everyone?" "I don't really have one yet," he replied quickly. "Just plan for 30, okay?" Looking back, I wish I had insisted on that list. But I was caught up in making sure everything was perfect. The tables were set. The lighting had that warm golden glow. My wine bar had been completely transformed, elegant, but still youthful enough for an 18th birthday. We had virgin cocktails, appetizers, and a playlist to match the mood. Ethan looked amazing in his sleek black suit. He stood laughing with friends, posing for photos. Melissa's family mingled with his classmates, and everything seemed to be going just right, and then he walked in. I recognized Kevin immediately, even before he said a word. He was unsteady on his feet, his eyes glassy. He was clearly drunk. "I'm here to wish my son a happy birthday," he announced loudly, drawing all eyes to him. I was sitting next to Ethan when Kevin stumbled over to our table. He looked at me with nothing but hatred. "Get up," he slurred, waving a hand. "That's my seat. I'm his real father, not you." I stayed calm. "There's plenty of space at the next table with the other guests. Why don't you join them?" "No," he snapped, his voice suddenly hard. "This is my spot. You need to leave my place. Who do you think you are?" I glanced at Melissa, hoping she'd say something, step in, anything. But she just sat there, pale, staring at her hands like they held the answer to everything. I took a deep breath. This was Ethan's night. I wasn't going to let it be ruined. Let me be clear, I said, locking eyes with Kevin. You have two choices. Take a seat at the next table, or security will escort you out. His face twisted in rage. Oh, listen to you, Mr. Big Shot, he spat. Think you can buy everything, huh? Buy my son? Buy love? People were starting to stare now. I saw a few of my regulars at nearby tables trying not to react, but definitely watching. My staff stood at the edges of the room, waiting for a signal from me. You just waltz in here with your fancy bar and your big house. Kevin kept going, voice rising. You think you can replace me with your money? You can't buy family. Then, before anyone could stop him, he grabbed a plate of charcuterie and smashed it to the ground. The crash echoed through the bar. He grabbed another plate. Smash. Then another. Cheese meets glass all over the marble floor. A bottle of imported sparkling water tipped over and spilled onto the polished wood of the bar. I caught my security team's eyes and gave a small nod. Sir, it's time to leave, the head of security said firmly, taking Kevin by the arm. They escorted him out while he kept shouting, now barely understandable, slurring as they pushed through the crowd. His voice faded down the hall until the front door slammed shut behind him. Silence. Then slowly the room came back to life. The guests began murmuring. I stood up, put on my best smile. Really sorry about that, everyone, I said. Please, enjoy the rest of the night, drinks are on the house. The regulars weren't fazed, they'd seen worse, and after a few minutes, the party picked back up. But at our table, it was different. People whispered. They looked at Ethan, at Melissa, at me. I knew this would be on Instagram before the night was over. Ethan sat stiffly, just pushing food around his plate. That sharp suit he'd been so excited to wear now looked like a costume. That suit, the one that had made Ethan look so grown up earlier, now seemed too big for him. It didn't make him look sharp anymore. It just made him look small, like a kid trying to play dress up. The Instagram perfect party he had dreamed of had turned into a complete nightmare. About an hour later, he mumbled, I have a headache. Can we go home? That was the end of the party. People made polite excuses as they left, but I heard the whispers. Poor Ethan. Did you see his dad? Can you believe that happened? As soon as we walked through the door, Ethan went straight to his room. I followed the girls upstairs, then went to his room to try and talk to him, to say something. But he didn't want to hear it. The next morning, after that awful night, Ethan came down to breakfast. He looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes. He slumped into his chair, staring at his lap. How are you feeling, buddy? I asked gently. Fine, he muttered to his cereal. That was it, one word. The days after that felt like living in a house full of ghosts. Ethan, once so full of life, barely spoke. Every time I walked into a room where he and Melissa were talking, he'd go quiet, like someone had flipped a switch. One night, after he'd gone to bed, I turned to Melissa. Don't you think we should do something? Maybe get him to talk to someone? She waved it off. He's fine. He's just processing. Give him space. But it wasn't fine. None of it was. Still, we all went to his graduation. Melissa and I sat in the audience, and I clapped until my hands hurt when they called his name. He looked great in his cap and gown. And when he glanced our way and smiled, for a moment I thought, maybe things are getting better. We hosted a party at the house that evening. I made sure we had all his favorites, truffle fries, steak sliders, the little crab cakes he always snuck from the bar's kitchen, and that ridiculous 3-tier chocolate cake that honestly should have taken a week to make. His classmates came over, and for a while the house was full of laughter, chatter about college, and summer plans. For a few hours it almost felt normal. Ethan was laughing, talking, looking like himself again. I let myself believe we were finally moving past it. Then his phone rang. He stepped into the hall to answer it, and when he came back, his face had changed. There was something firm in his expression, like he had made up his mind. He walked right up to me and said, My dad's coming over. He wants to congratulate me on graduating. My stomach sank. Absolutely not, I said instantly. The memory of his birthday was still burned into my mind. Ethan, think about what happened. He showed up drunk, caused a scene, destroyed property. That was your fault. Ethan snapped, his voice rising. None of that would have happened if you just moved and let him sit down. He's my real dad. You should have stepped aside. It felt like a punch to the gut. After all this time, all this silence, that's what he had been thinking. That I was the one to blame? I turned to Melissa. desperate for her to finally say something, anything. "Melissa, please," I said. "Tell him. Tell him how inappropriate his father's behavior was at the party." But she just sat there, staring down at her hands again like she had at the wine bar, silent, still, avoiding, and something inside me broke. 5 years. 5 years of trying to be the perfect stepfather. Of walking on eggshells, of making excuses, of swallowing every bit of anger and disappointment. It all came out. "Listen to me, Ethan," I said, my voice steady but firm. "That was my wine bar. I planned that whole party for you. I got you that designer suit you wanted. I did everything, to make that night special, and your dad? He showed up drunk. Humiliated you in front of your friends, destroyed my property, and nearly ruined everything. He didn't even bring you a gift, Ethan," I said, trying to stay calm. "All he brought was chaos and embarrassment." Ethan's face changed instantly from angry to completely furious. "Oh my God, here we go again," he yelled, throwing his hands in the air. "It's always about the money with you, isn't it? I paid for this. I bought that. You act like just because you have money, you get to control everything." He spun around to his classmates, who were standing there awkwardly, clearly wishing they were anywhere else. "My real dad is on his way," he said with a bitter laugh. "It'll be nice to finally have a normal person in this house instead of this." He pointed at me like I was something disgusting on the bottom of his shoe. "Your father is not coming into this house," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Not after what happened at the bar." That was it, Ethan exploded. His face went red, and he started yelling loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear. "You're not my dad," he screamed. "You're nothing to me. You're nobody. Who do you think you are, telling me what to do? Stay out of my life. You're just some guy my mom married for his money." The room went completely silent. His friends shifted uncomfortably, some pretending to check their phones, others staring up at the ceiling like they'd never seen it before. Ethan turned back to them, his voice cold and full of disgust. "Let's get out of here," he said. "I don't want to celebrate in his house anyway." He spat the word "his" like it was poison. His friends quickly followed him out, not one of them making eye contact with me. Then the door slammed so hard the windows shook. I stood there alone, surrounded by untouched food, tipped over drinks, and dropped plates. It felt like I'd been hit by a truck. And I thought, this has to be it. Finally, Melissa would speak up. She'd have to say something now. She'd have to stand by me, wouldn't she? "Mel?" I said, barely able to keep my voice steady. She cleared her throat. Her voice was cold. "You had no right to throw the house and money in his face like that," she said flatly. "You didn't need to remind him that this is your house or that you pay for everything. That was low." I just stared at her. "You've got to be kidding me," I said, finally seeing her clearly. "Where were you when your ex was throwing plates in my bar? Where were you just now when your son screamed in front of everyone, insulting me?" She shook her head like I was the one who'd lost it. "You're the adult," she snapped. "You should know better than to argue with a teenager." I let out a bitter laugh. "And you should know better than to bury your head in the sand like a coward," I fired back. "That's what you do, isn't it? Stay quiet while your ex and your son treat me like trash. Well, guess what? I'm done. I'm done being everyone's punching bag." Her face tightened. She didn't say another word. She turned and walked upstairs. A few minutes later, I heard the door to the guest room slam shut. The next morning, breakfast felt like a funeral. Melissa sat across from me, barely touching her scrambled eggs, not looking at me. I was about to get up and walk away when Ethan stumbled into the kitchen, still in his clothes from the night before. I smelled the alcohol before he even got to the table. I looked at Melissa, waiting, hoping for her to say something. Her teenage son reeked of booze and rolled in at 9 in the morning. But as usual, she said nothing, just stared at her plate. "Where have you been all night?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Ethan looked at me with bloodshot eyes and pure hate. "None of your business," he said. "You're not my dad. You're not anyone. You're just some empty space taking up room in this house." Then he turned and stumbled upstairs. Melissa said nothing. Not a word. By then, I had come to believe that silence wasn't just her default, it was her superpower. What followed felt like living in a house haunted by some bitter ghost. Ethan didn't speak to me directly at all anymore. Instead, he referred to me like I was an object in the room. "Dad," he'd say to Melissa, pointing right at me, "can you ask your husband to pass the salt?" Or he'd walk into a room, stand there and say, "This guy is in my way," waiting silently for me to move like I was a coffee table. I said nothing. I watched. 5 years I had poured into this family, trying to be the perfect stepfather. Now I was done. Let them show me who they really were, and they did. One Sunday evening, Melissa and I sat in silence, eating dinner like strangers, when Ethan burst into the dining room, waving an envelope like a prize. "Dad, I got in," he shouted, beaming. "Why, you accepted me. My dream school." He ran up to Melissa and wrapped her in a huge hug. Both of them were all smiles. Then Ethan turned, looked at me with a smug grin I'll never forget, and said to her, loud enough for me to hear, "Tell your husband he needs to pay for my tuition." Something inside me just snapped. I smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was cold, sharp, and final. "I won't be paying for your college education," I said calmly. "You've made it clear I'm not your father. I'm nobody, remember? Well, guess what? This nobody's wallet is closed. Ask your real dad." Ethan's face turned a dangerous shade of red. "You vindictive piece of—" He was shaking now, tears forming in his eyes. "You're just doing this to punish me. You're evil." I stood there, strangely calm, as he threw insult after insult my way. It was like watching a hurricane through a glass window. I saw the storm, but it couldn't touch me anymore. "Mom!" he shouted, turning to Melissa in a panic. "Make him pay. He has to pay." Melissa cleared her throat and looked at me like I was a child misbehaving in public. "Come on, honey," she said in that soft, condescending tone I'd grown to despise. "Stop playing around. You know you need to pay for Ethan's education." I pushed my chair back and stood up. "No," I said, calm and firm. "I'm not paying tens of thousands of dollars for someone who spent weeks treating me like I'm nothing, like I'm invisible in my own home." Then I walked out, leaving Ethan's shouting echoing behind me. I heard the sounds of things crashing downstairs, the dramatic stomping, the sobbing, the full tantrum. Like father, like so. I sat in the quiet of my bedroom, listening as the chaos slowly faded, but I knew it wasn't over. About 30 minutes later, the bedroom door slammed open. Melissa stormed in, red-faced and furious. "I'm sick of this," she spat. "Sick of you and your games. You need to grow up and pay for Ethan's education." I looked up at her from where I sat on the bed. "No," I said evenly. "You and your ex can figure it out. I'm sure between the two of you, you can work something out." Her jaw clenched. She started pacing like an animal trapped in a cage. "You're being completely selfish," she hissed. "He's just a teenager, for God's sake. You're the adult here. You should be the bigger person." I watched her, remembering how many times I'd heard those same lines. "Be the bigger person, Robert. Let it go, Robert. He's just a kid, Robert." Excuse after excuse. Smile, not pay the bill. That had been my role. I took a deep breath, let it out slowly. "He's a teenager who knows exactly what he's doing," I said quietly. "He's shown me who he is and how he feels about me. Why would I invest in someone's future when all he's ever given me is contempt?" Melissa stopped pacing. She turned to face me. Her voice was flat, ice cold. "Fine, then let me make this simple. Either you pay for Ethan's education or I'm filing for divorce." She expected me to cave, to beg, to apologize, to reach for my wallet like always. I didn't. I shrugged. "Okay, get divorced." The look on her face was almost comical. Her mouth opened, then closed. Then opened again, but no words came out. Apparently, no one had ever called her bluff before. She hadn't expected me to call her bluff. "I'll call my lawyer first thing in the morning," I said, my voice firm. "Until then, you and Ethan can start figuring out where you're going to live." Melissa didn't respond. She just stood there, looking at me, really looking at me for what felt like the first time. Then, without a word, she turned and quietly closed the door behind her. The next morning, I came downstairs to find Ethan already at the dining table, waiting. It felt staged like a performance. Melissa sat beside him, wearing that practiced look of calm concern. Ethan's eyes were red-rimmed, his face pulled into an expression of soft regret. "Honey," Melissa began, with a smile so manipulative I was shocked. I hadn't noticed it before. "We've all had a chance to calm down and think about things." Ethan nodded along like a trained actor. "We all just overreacted yesterday," he said, his voice syrupy sweet. I stood in the doorway, something inside me crystallizing. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. I was just done. It was like seeing two strangers sit in my home and try to sell me the same bad lie again. Melissa's voice turned reasonable, her signature tactic. We're family. Families fight, but they also make up. And since you were the one who escalated things with this college mess, maybe you could take the first step. Ethan jumped in, right on cue. Yeah, and if you helped with tuition, it would show you're really sorry and that you want to fix things. I almost laughed. They really thought this would work. A carefully worded appeal, some faux maturity, a spoonful of guilt, and suddenly I'd be writing checks again? Actually, I said, pulling out my phone. I just got off the phone with my lawyer 5 minutes ago. The divorce papers should be ready this afternoon. The transformation was instant. Ethan's fake smile dissolved. Melissa's face flushed with that all-too-familiar shade of rage. I turned to Ethan. Congratulations, I said flatly. You won't have to deal with your not dad anymore, isn't that what you wanted? Ethan burst into tears, real ones this time, but I didn't move. I had nothing left to give, not even sympathy. Melissa sprang to her feet, knocking her chair back in the process. Without another word, she stormed upstairs. I heard drawers being yanked open, closet doors slamming shut. The packing was silent. No more lectures, no more guilt trips. Just the sound of zippers, boxes, and endings. I thought that was the final act. I was wrong. The messages started that night. First, Melissa, we all said things we regret. Let's talk like adults. Then Ethan, I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings. But you're being totally unfair about college. When I didn't respond, the tone shifted. You're destroying this family. You'll be sorry when you're old and alone. Hope you enjoy your money since it's all you've got now. Still, I said nothing. The divorce was clean and fast. I'd planned well. Melissa fought, of course, but my lawyer shut it down. She walked away with nothing, no stake in the wine bar, no piece of my savings. Through mutual acquaintances, I still hear things sometimes. They live in a small apartment across town. Ethan couldn't afford new. He's working retail now, somewhere in the mall. Melissa's trying to restart her accounting career, but apparently it's not going well. I redecorated the house. Replaced every piece of furniture that reminded me of them. The place feels bigger now, lighter, or maybe that's just me finally free of the weight of trying to buy love from people who are always just looking for a transaction.